Anti-Turkism, also known as Turkophobia, Turcophobia, or anti-Turkish sentiment, is the hostility, fear, intolerance, or racism against the Turkish people, Turkish culture, Turkic people or Turkey itself, or, previously, the Ottoman Empire. Anti-Turkism or Turcophobia does not only refer to intolerance against the Turks of Turkey, but also against the Turks as whole, such as Azeri Turks, Qashqai Turks, Crimean Turks, Turkmen people, Bulgarian Turks, Macedonian Turks, Turkish Cypriots, Bosnian Turks, Turks of Georgia, Turks of the Dodecanese, Kosovo Turks, Croatian Turks, and Romanian Turks. It can also refer to racism against ethnic Turks of Turkey living outside of Turkey in the Turkish diaspora. The roots of Turcophobia can be traced back to the Hunnic invasions of Europe, where Huns, or Turks, were ruthless foreign nomadic hordes in Europe and inspired fear amongst local Europeans. The later evidence of anti-Turkism in Europe originated in 1453–54 in the form of liturgical masses against Turks, Missa contra Turcos in Latin. By 1870, the anti-Turk phenomenon is defined by the term Turkophobia. Turcophobia is traced to the fall of Constantinople and the Turkish Wars of the late Middle Ages, viz. the attempts of Western Christianity to stem the expansion of the Ottoman Empire. By the middle of the 15th century, special masses called Missa contra Turcos, translated as Mass against Turks, were celebrated in various places in Europe. The message of these masses was that victory over the Turks was only possible with the help of God, and that a Christian community was therefore necessary to withstand the cruelty of the Turks. 16th century. As the Ottomans expanded their empire Western Europe came into more frequent contact and with Turks, often militarily. During the Ottoman-Venetian Wars several notable battles were fought, such as the Ottoman conquest of the island of Cyprus, where over 56,000 Christian inhabitants were massacred or taken prisoner, and the island's commander Marco Antonio Bragadin was mutilated and flayed alive, despite Turkish assurances he and his men could leave upon surrender. Such accounts of atrocities became so frequent that the Turks quickly gained the reputation for cruelty and lack of honor in war. Bishop Fabri of Vienna, 1536–41, claimed that there are no crueler and more audacious villains under the heavens than the Turks, who spare no age or sex and mercilessly cut down young and old alike and pluck unripe fruit from the wombs of mothers. In the 16th century about 2,500 publications about the Turks were spread around Europe, over 1,000 of which were in German. In these publications the image of the bloodthirsty Turk was imprinted on reader. In fact, in the period of 1480 to 1610, twice as many books were published about the Turkish threat to Europe than about the discovery of the continents of the New World. During this time the Ottoman Empire had invaded the Balkans and had been besieging Vienna. There was much fear in Europe about the Ottoman advance, most profoundly in Germany. German Protestant Reformation leader Martin Luther cleverly used these fears by asserting that the Turks were the agents of the devil who, along with the Antichrist located in the heart of the Catholic Church, Rome, would usher in the last days and the apocalypse. Luther had the view that the Turks' invasion of Europe was God's punishment of Christianity because it had allowed the corruption of both the Holy See and the Church. In 1518, when he defended his 95 Theses, Luther claimed that God had sent the Turks to punish the Christians in the same way as he had sent war, plagues and earthquakes. The reply of Pope Leo X was the famous papal bull in which he threatened Luther with excommunication and attempted to portray Luther as a troublemaker who advocated capitulation to the Turks. In his writings on war against the Turk and military sermon against the Turks, Martin Luther is consistent in his theological conception of the Turks as a manifestation of God's chastising rod. Luther and his followers particularly made important contributions to the view that the war between Habsburgs and Ottomans was also a war between Christ and Antichrist, or between God and the devil. The Portuguese Empire, seeking to invade more lands in East Africa and other parts of the world, used any encounter with the terrible Turk provided them with a prime opportunity to establish credentials as champions of the faith on par with other Europeans. Stories of the Wolf Turk also gave Europe this negative image of the Turks. The wolf Turk was claimed to be a man-eating being, half animal half human with a wolf's head and tail. Military power and cruelty were the recurring attributes in all these claims about the origins of the Turks. 17th century. During the 17th century, Turks and Turkish lifestyle continued to be portrayed negatively. According to some sympathetic Orientalist authors, the usage of accounts of Turkish customs and Turkish people written during the 17th and 18th centuries, served as an ideological weapon during the Enlightenment's arguments about the nature of government. Authors projected an image of Turkish people that is inaccurate but accepted. Regarding writings on Turkish people and their lifestyles, accuracy was of little importance, what matters was the illusion. 25 Yet at the same time, contradictory and contemporary reports exist documenting the brutality, corrupt governance, and atrocities of subjugated Christian peoples, such as the law forcing all Christian families to relinquish at least one child into Janissaries, to fulfill the Muslim Quranic concept and requirement of jizya, as well as other accounts detailing rapes, forced conversions, murders under torture, and full-scale massacres which occurred in Rodopi mountain region of what is now Bulgaria. In Sweden, the Turks were designated the arch-enemy of Christianity. This is evident in a book entitled Luna Turcica eller Turkeskmane, and Wisjandas lika som uti enspel det Muhammad iski vanskelijregmentet, for delter uti firik varder eller bakker, Turkish moon showing as in a mirror the dangerous Mohammedan rule, divided into 4 quarters or books, which was published in 1694 and was written by the parish priest Erland Driselius of Jönköping. In sermons the country's clergy preached about the Turks' general cruelty and bloodthirstiness and of how they systematically burned and plundered the areas they conquered. In a Swedish school book published in 1795, Islam was described as the false religion that had been fabricated by the great deceiver Muhammad, to which the Turks to this day universally confess. In Orientalism, Edward Said noted that, until the end of the 17th century, the Ottoman peril lurked alongside Europe to represent for the whole of Christian civilization a constant danger, and in time European civilization incorporated that peril and its lore, its great events, figures, virtues, and vices, as something woven into the fabric of life. 18th century. Voltaire and other European writers criticized the Turks as tyrants who destroyed Europe's heritage. In 1718, James Puckle demonstrated his new invention, the defense gun, better known as the Puckle gun, a tripod-mounted, single-barreled flintlock weapon fitted with a multi-shot revolving cylinder, designed for shipboard use to prevent boarding. Puckle demonstrated 2 versions of the basic design: one, intended for use against Christian enemies, fired conventional round bullets, while the second variant, designed to be used against the Muslim Turks, fired square bullets, designed by Kyle Tunis, which were considered to be more damaging and would, according to its patent, convince the Turks of the benefits of Christian civilization. 19th century. English author Charles Dickens, in a 1844 poem titled A Word in Season, criticized Turkish people for ruthlessly defacing God's living image, saying that they lived in brutal ignorance, and toil, and dearth. Dickens contrasts these traits with Britain's highly civilized and thinking nation. In his 1869 travelogue The Innocents Abroad, American author Mark Twain called Turks a people by nature and training filthy, brutish, ignorant. Within the Ottoman Empire. Within the Ottoman Empire, the name Turk was sometimes used to denote the Turkmen backwoodsmen, bumpkins, or the illiterate peasants in Anatolia. Etraki by Idruk, for example, was an Ottoman play on words, meaning the ignorant Turk. Ozai Mehmet in his book Islamic Identity and Development, Studies of the Islamic Periphery mentions, the ordinary Turks, Turkmen, did not have a sense of belonging to a ruling ethnic group. In particular, they had a confused sense of self-image. Who were they, Turks, Muslims, or Ottomans? Their literature was sometimes Persian, sometimes Arabic, but always courtly and elitist. There was always a huge social and cultural distance between the imperial center and the Anatolian periphery. As Bernard Lewis expressed it, in the imperial society of the Ottomans the ethnic term Turk was little used, and then chiefly in a rather derogatory sense, to designate the Turkoman nomads or, later, the ignorant and uncouth Turkish-speaking peasants of the Anatolian villages. Lewis 1968, 1. In the words of a British observer of the Ottoman values and institutions at the start of the 20th century, the surest way to insult an Ottoman gentleman is to call him a Turk. His face will straightway wear the expression a Londoner's assumes, when he hears himself frankly styled a Cockney. He is no Turk, no savage, he will assure you, but an Ottoman subject of the Sultan, by no means to be confounded with certain barbarian-styled Turkomans, and from whom indeed, on the male side, he may possibly be descended. David. 1907, 209. Handan Nezire Akmez is another author who describes the attempts of the Young Turk movement to ingrain nationalism among the Turkish speakers of the Ottoman Empire prior to World War I. Contemporary anti-Turkism. Before the 1960s, Turkey had relatively low emigration. After the adoption of new constitution in 1961, Turkish citizens began migrating outside. Gradually, in certain Western countries, Turks became a prominent ethnic minority group, and thus, become increasingly visible and vocal. But since the beginning Turks were subject to discrimination against them. Even when host countries launched a shift in policy regarding their immigrants, only the Turkish workers were excluded from them. The term Turk has acquired a meaning similar to barbarian or heathen in various European languages, or use Turk as a slur or curse. Due to that negative influence, it had instances of negative use and image in the U.S. Armenia. Armenia-Turkey relations have historically been hostile primarily due to the Armenian genocide of 1915 and its denial by Turkey. According to a 2007 survey, 78% of Armenians see Turkey as a threat. According to Vartan Huruyudi Union, Armenian nationalism is based on anti-Turkism, and the most patriotic Armenian is the most anti-Turkish. In general, for an Armenian, anti-Turkism and patriotism are directly proportional. The Turkish population of Bulgaria before the country was reformed in 1878 is estimated at one-third of the total. By 1876, approximately 70% of the fertile arable land belonged to the Turks. Afterward, an estimated 220,000 Turks migrated to Turkey between 1923 and 1949, though the Turkish government encouraged the emigration. Then, another wave of Turks left Bulgaria. Some 155,000 were either expelled or allowed to leave in 1949-51, though the emigration occurred following an agreement with the Turkish government. In 1984, the Bulgarian government started a Bulgarization process whereby policies were instigated to limit the cultural and ethnic characteristics of Bulgarian Turks. Approximately 800,000 Turks were forced to change their names to Bulgarian names. Furthermore, Turks were not allowed to attend the Muslim religious ceremonies, speak Turkish in public places, or wear traditional Turkish clothing. This eventually led to the biggest mass exodus in Europe since World War II ensued after the border with Turkey was opened in June 1989, and in the span of 3 months approximately 350,000 Turks left Bulgaria on tourist visas, hence the event is known as the Big Excursion, and crossed the border into Turkey. Eventually, especially after the removal of Tatar Zhivkov from power, over 150,000 Turks returned to Bulgaria, but more than 200,000 chose to remain in Turkey permanently. The former Bulgarian Prime Minister Boyko Borisov, 2009-2013, has been accused of having anti-Turkish tendencies. In December 2009, Borisov declared himself in favor of a motion put forth by the Nationalist Party Ataka and its leader for holding a referendum over the broadcast of daily Turkish language news emissions on the Bulgarian national TV, but he later withdrew support. The Turkish Prime Minister expressed his concern of rising anti-Turkish sentiments in Bulgaria to the Bulgarian Prime Minister. The Turkish Foreign Ministry also expressed its concern over the rising heated rhetoric in Bulgaria on the issue of the Turkish language news. According to a report by Ivan Dikov, not just Ataka but a large number of Bulgarians have resented the news in Turkish Cyprus. The island of Cyprus became an independent state in 1960, with power sharing between the Greek Cypriots and Turkish Cypriots under the 1960 Zurich agreements. In December 1963, the events known as Bloody Christmas, Tırkmenel Noel, where Turkish Cypriots ousted from the Republic and Greek Cypriots initiated a military campaign against them, which led to the beginning of ethnic clashes between the two communities that were to continue for 11 years. At this time, Turkish Cypriots bore the heavier cost in terms of casualties, and some 25,000 Turkish Cypriots became internally displaced, accounting to about a fifth of their population. These Turkish Cypriots had become internally displaced and lived as refugees for at least 10 years before the 1974 Turkish invasion. By the late 1960s, tension continued to grow and approximately 60,000 Turkish Cypriots left their homes and moved into enclaves. This resulted in an exodus of Turkish Cypriots, with the majority migrating to the United Kingdom whilst others went to Turkey, North America, and Australia. It has been observed that Turks are the most prominent ethnic minority group in contemporary Germany. But discrimination against Turkish minority occurs in various everyday situations in Germany. After the adoption of the 1961 constitution, Turkish citizens began migrating outside the country. While the population of Turkish immigrant workers reached 3 million, Turkish minorities have become well-known butts of welfare chauvinism and racial violence in Germany. After 1980, xenophobia targeting Turkish minorities grew parallel with unemployment rates, and latent anti-Semitism was transformed into open anti-Turkism. Turks subjected to destructive jokes and public discourse and were shown ludicrously different in their food tastes, dress, names, and even in their ability to develop survival techniques. Those eye-opening jokes contain such a great deal of animosity and aggressive tendencies so that it is reflected in the actual increasing violence towards Turks. As a result of all these discrimination, serious behavioral consequences of prejudice against Turks is prevailing in Germany. The number of violent acts by right-wing extremists in Germany increased dramatically between 1990 and 1992. On November 25, 1992, 3 Turkish residents were killed in a firebombing in Mölln, northern Germany. The attack prompted even further perplexity, since the victims were neither refugees nor lived in a hostel. The same was true for the incident in a Westphalian town on May 29, 1993, where another arson attack took place in Solingen on a Turkish family that had resided in Germany for 23 years, 5 of whom were burned to death. Several neighbors heard someone shout "Heil Hitler!" before dousing the front porch and door with gasoline and setting the fire to the home. However, most Germans condemned these attacks on foreigners, and many marched in candlelight processions. According to Greg Nees, because Turks are both darker-skinned and Muslim, conservative Germans are largely against granting them citizenship. Greece. A Turkish community currently live in Western Thrace, which is located in the northeastern part of Greece. After forcibly conquering Greece in the 15th century, Turks owned 84% of the land in Western Thrace in 1922, but now the minority estimates this figure to be between 20–40%. This stems from various practices of the Greek administration, whereby ethnic Greeks are encouraged to purchase Turkish land with soft loans granted by the state. The Western Thrace Turks has traditionally been estimated to number between 120,000 and 130,000, yet, this is the estimate of the Turkish state side, when in fact the Muslim population consists of various ethnic and religious backgrounds, out of which actually Pomaks, Muslim people of Slavic origins and language, and Muslim Gypsies, Roma-related people of Muslim religion, consist of the majority of the overall Muslim groups, with Sunni Muslims that self-ascribe ethnically as Turks being the minority. In terms of religion, next to Sunni Muslims, the Pomaks and Gypsies present sizable Alevite and Betashi groups. Thus, the Greek government refers to the overall Muslim community, the one Turkey ascribes as Turkish community, as Greek Muslims or Hellenic Muslims, and does not recognize any specific Turkish minority in Western Thrace. Greek courts have also outlawed the use of the word Turkish to describe the community so as to avoid the term being wrongly ascribed indiscriminately to unrelated Muslim citizens. In 1988, the Greek High Court affirmed a 1986 decision of the Court of Appeals of Thrace, Indiana, which the Union of Turkish Associations of Western Thrace was ordered closed for reasons of illegally ascribing the term on unrelated/unaware people. The court held that the use of the word Turkish referred to citizens of Turkey, and could not be used to describe citizens of Greece. Malta. Having fought the Ottoman Empire in the Siege of Malta of 1565, the Maltese still have colorful vocabulary regarding this event. For example, when the sun is visible during rainfall, the expression Tigam Turk translates to "a Turk has been baptized," which was considered to be a rare event, or alternatively Çwild Turk, "a Turk was born," is often used. Another expression is Hakt Gaturak, curse on the Turks, used when something goes wrong. Religious representations reveal the extent of this historic rivalry, with a diplomatic incident nearly arising following the wrong depiction of the Turkish flag instead of that of the Ottoman Empire in a religious statue displayed for a village festa in Vitoriyasa. Netherlands. The Netherlands has a sizable Turkish minority group as well as Germany. Turkish ethnic minority group is the second largest ethnic minority group living in the Netherlands, and their culture is considered to differ substantially from Dutch culture. Even though progressive policies are installed, especially compared with those in some other European countries such as Germany, Human Rights Watch criticized the Netherlands for new legislations violating the human rights of Turkish ethnic minority group. The European Commission Against Racism and Intolerance published its third report on Netherlands in 2008. In this report, Turkish minority group is described as a notable community which have been particularly affected by stigmatization of and discrimination against members of minority groups as a result of controversial policies of the governments of Netherlands. The same report also noted that the tone of Dutch political and public debate around integration and other issues relevant to ethnic minorities has experienced a dramatic deterioration. Recently, use of the word allochtonon as a catch-all expression for the other emerged as a new development. European Network Against Racism, an international organization supported by European Commission, reported that, in Netherlands, half of the Turks reported having experienced racial discrimination. Same report points dramatic growth of Islamophobia parallel with anti-Semitism. Another international organization, European Monitoring Center on Racism and Xenophobia, highlighted negative trend in Netherlands, regarding attitudes towards minorities, compared to average EU results. The analysis also noted that compared to most other Europeans, in the Netherlands, majority group is more in favor of cultural assimilation of minorities rather than cultural enrichment by minority groups. Within the Soviet Union, ethnic cleansing of Turks during World War II took the form of mass deportations carried out by the NKVD and the Red Army. The reason for the deportation was because the Soviet Union was preparing to launch a pressure campaign against Turkey. In June 1945, Vyacheslav Molotov, then Minister of Foreign Affairs, formally presented a demand to the Turkish ambassador in Moscow for the surrender of 3 Armenian provinces, Kars, Ardahan, and Artvin. Moscow was also preparing to support Armenian claims to several other Armenian provinces. Thus, war against Turkey seemed possible, and Joseph Stalin wanted to clear the strategic Turkish population, especially those situated in Meskheti, located near the Turkish-Georgian border, which were likely to be hostile to Soviet intentions. The deportation is relatively poorly documented, but Soviet sources suggest that an estimated 115,000 Turks were deported mainly to Central Asia, most of which settled in Uzbekistan. However, numerous Turks died along the way. In 1989, ethnic clashes between the Uzbeks and Turks occurred. According to official figures, 103 people died and over 1,000 were wounded. Moreover, 700 houses were destroyed and more than 90,000 Meskhetian Turks were driven out of Uzbekistan. The events of 1989 are considered by the Turks as their second deportation. Those that remained in Uzbekistan complained, in private due to the fear of repercussions, of ethnic discrimination. Although some have returned to Meskheti, a problem has constantly been that Georgians and Armenians who settled into the homes of the Turks have vowed to take up arms against any return movements. Moreover, many Georgians have advocated that the Meskhetian Turks should be sent to Turkey, where they belong. More recently, some Turks in Russia, especially those in Krasnodar, have faced hostility from the local population. The Krasnodar Meskhetian Turks have suffered significant human rights violations, including the deprivation of their citizenship. They are deprived of civil, political, and social rights and are prohibited from owning property and employment. Thus, since 2004, many Turks have left the Krasnodar region for the United States as refugees, which is now becoming their third deportation. They are still barred from full repatriation to Georgia. Nowadays, many Georgians have antipathy, and sometimes hatred, toward Turks, due historical reasons and Turkish migration in Azeri region, although general sentiment remains friendly between the two states.